Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, February 8th, 2017, and time for yet another show. Time marches on. Seems to be nothing we can do about stopping this. Numerous topics, of course, to cover today. The big story, let's see, I don't know. What do you want to make the big story today? Is it last night's fight on the Senate floor? They were running another all-nighter, Democrats were, in order to keep the floor and run all 30 hours post-cloture on the Jeff Sessions nomination. The time has come to begin dealing with that as a reality. That'll come to a vote today. And, with the new reality on the floor and the way the filibuster works, and you're welcome for that. I know some of you probably think that was horrible. But believe me, somehow in the long run this will all work out, despite the fact that we will end up dealing with Jeff Sessions as our Attorney General for the time being anyway. And last night, in an attempt to run all 30 hours off the clock and slow things down as long as possible, Democrats were on the floor again and speaking, and I guess the biggest story of that, which would not have been a big story, by the way, but for the impatience of the Republicans. We were, of course, considering Jeff Sessions, and Senator Elizabeth Warren joined in the 30-hour consumption, and part of her speech was to read the well-circulated letter during the hearings, certainly, but the story being that she read the Coretta Scott King letter that was written and sent to the Judiciary Committee back in, 86, when Sessions was first being considered as a federal judge. If you haven't run into a place online to read the relevant part of the letter or the entirety of the letter, well, then you've been asleep this morning, and that's okay. You can be forgiven. It's all over the place. The essence of the relevant part of the letter, of course, that Coretta Scott King writing in to say, yeah, Jeff Sessions doesn't belong on the federal bench. He's a bigot and a racist, and it's a huge step backward if we put him there. Of course, I guess it could have been a huge step backward at the time. I wonder whether it would have prevented him from ending up in the Senate and later as Attorney General, which will also likely be a large step backward. But who knows? He may plunge off the cliff with the Trump administration in now. So that took up the most time last night and was most shared, I would guess. Armando has differences as to which are the most important stories. As you know, I measure importance. This is the Trump era, and I measure them in Trump units. That is to say, how much social media or television time is this story consuming? The actual top stories of the day are probably elsewhere, including also lots of retweets this morning, if I want to measure things this way. Watching Radley Balco put it as succinctly as possible seems like a totally normal, not at all iguano, insane way to make life and death decisions about national security. What's he talking about? He included the New York Daily News write-up of the story, and that's always going to be a gut punch, Daily News. The story being, here's the headline: Trump launched that botched, that disastrous Yemen raid that he thinks is a huge success because reasons. He launched that raid after being told that Obama wouldn't have been, quote, bold enough to do it himself. And that was all he needed to hear. He launched it without intelligence backing it up, despite the fact that they had good information that the raid news had been leaked to the enemy, and they were waiting, and SEAL was killed, children were killed, the women at the compound were taking up arms and firing back. Now they, of course, claim that this was all... Well, first of all, we learned that they missed the main target of the raid. They didn't kill the guy they were there to kill, but now they claim, oh, well, it was just an intelligence gathering raid. We wanted to see whether if we approached the compound, whether we would be shot at, and we were. So now we have intelligence. And, once again, national security decisions being made by an idiot on the basis of nothing other than I'm strong. By the way, we're nearing day 20 of the Trump administration. And you'll recall, of course, the ironclad promise that Donald Trump would have his generals deliver a plan to defeat ISIS in the first 30 days. So we're down to I'll give you about 10, 12 days left until that's going to be on his desk. We'll see whether, I don't believe he remembered to ask at this point, but let's not remind him. Let's see what he comes up with on his own. Armando also contributes this point. Another of the big stories, I guess, if the show were 12 hours earlier, well, actually the hearing was going on just a little, maybe a couple hours before the Elizabeth Warren story exploded. And I'll explain the procedure of that one to you if you're still wondering about that after we speak perhaps with Greg Dworkin, who has his own raft of stories. But let's squeeze in the Armando raft first. The travel ban hearing in the Ninth Circuit yesterday. Maybe we'll have Armando tell us a little bit about that one if he's got a minute in between speaking to Greg. And I have to check in on whether or not Joan is going to be able to join us. Ordinarily, she will join us on a Wednesday, but there's action in the Senate, and sometimes that means she's got to keep an eye on it, even though it's really just burning hours on the clock until the sessions vote. Still, people have their eye on these things, and you never know when an explosion may happen between senators. But yes, another of the big stories of last night, a hearing in the Ninth Circuit in which the government had a difficult time of it. I don't know who they sent to go and take care of this issue, but they had a rough day. And perhaps we can talk over some of the legal points. But we've got some stories and coverage on that to share, as well as one last thing that Armando wanted to sneak in. Trump Tower now renting space. In addition to renting space to the Secret Service, which they have to do in order to keep Melania and Barron safe while they are there all the time. And when Trump visits, of course, on weekends. Which, has he done that yet? I don't know. He's going back to Mar-a-Lago next weekend. Maybe the first weekend he went back to New York. Anyway, now the DOD has to rent space there, too, in order to have some place to park the nuclear football and continue other support operations when Trump is in New York. And so we have at least two federal agencies now renting out maybe entire floors in Trump Tower, which is, of course, a serious problem under the Domestic Emoluments Clause. But in case you don't care about that stuff, I guess ask yourself this. Why, if Trump Tower is so gorgeous and beautiful and successful, are there entire floors available to rent to the Secret Service and the Department of Defense? I don't know. But maybe the answer lies in the fact that he's actually quite a flop as a businessman, as evidenced by another article shared with me this morning by Josh Warren, the Toronto Trump Tower now falling into bankruptcy and in court with investors. So we'll try and check in on all these things. And first, though, take a turn through the gardens here with Greg Dworkin. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, let's go for a walk.
All right. What do you got? What do you want to chat about today?
Well, it's 55 degrees today, but it'll be a foot of snow tomorrow.
Are you going to get that much?
10 to 12, they say.
Wow. All right. We're going to get a little sprinkling of it, I think. Nothing to get in the way
I'll
of school.
take pictures.
All right. Very good. We'll share those on social
media. I'll be on the show tomorrow. Tomorrow's Thursday, so I will be here to tell you all about the snow. Of course, it's just starting in the morning, so we won't have that much. But by evening, we're supposed to have a lot. So anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot happening, and Armando's the expert. But I did listen to a little bit of the hearing that they had broadcast.
Yes, a lot of people were just interested that it was being,
and carrying it
streamed.
like that was the only thing that was on. For a change, the cables were actually helpful.
Yeah.
It's so much better listening to that than like Chris Matthews,
Right. And I understand they had that Sanders-Cruz debate on last night, too. So there's a lot of
which I didn't watch, but I'm told was actually a little more interesting than people expected. Partly because Cruz came from the point of view, look, government has to do something. Let's just debate what it is, as opposed to government shouldn't do anything.
Yes. All I heard about Cruz was that he congratulated somebody for
having multiple sclerosis. And, I hope you do okay with your struggle that I'm going to make you struggle with, because I'm going to take away everything that's possibly supporting you. Yeah, I mean, it was bizarre. It was odd. But,
gosh.
It was there. I didn't see that. What I did hear is parts and snippets of the discussion about the travel ban. And it's always interesting when you I'm not a lawyer, okay? So I'm just listening to the discussion and the questions, the very sharp questions on both sides, to both sides, from the judges. And everybody who's a legal expert assures me you can't tell much from the questioning. But it seemed pretty clear, even to a novice, to a amateur, that the government wasn't totally prepared, didn't know how to answer everything, said things in the middle of discussion like, well, I know this isn't going well, but... And they did. I mean, that was a quote.
I mean, they may not be personally terribly interested in actually winning this case.
Well, I looked it up because the person who was actually doing the arguing on the part of the government is a longtime person there. It wasn't just a political appointee from a couple weeks ago. So how much their heart is in it, I don't know. Obviously, it's their job to do this. And I thought that the argument was a bit more coherent on the other side. You couldn't tell from the judges. One judge, lady judge, was clearly on the side from questioning of continuing the ban, and one was a little bit skeptical about the scope of it and wanted to defer as best as possible to the government. And the third one, you couldn't tell anything. I think that was the oldest of the judges. And really, to me, listening as an amateur, it was all about, is this really a Muslim ban or is it not? And there's arguments to be made that it was, and I thought that, it was just fascinating listening. And the thing is, if you are lying about what you're doing, which is what the government has done, it's not a ban, yes it is, it's only a couple of people actually, it's a couple of, 60,000 people, it becomes much harder under direct probing questioning to really sustain garbage.
It does.
This is how I was listening to it.
Well, not surprising, and I mean, I would be surprised if they had in place at this level, that is to say, DOJ lawyers at mid-level who would be handling these kinds of hearings, if they had Trump acolytes in place. I don't think they've got that at this point, and it'd be hard to find somebody who would be willing to stand there.
Don't even know how to turn the lights on.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe that's what they're all in the same room, fumbling for the doorknob. They're ready to go. They just can't get out.
I think you said on the show yesterday. They're like on the wall next to the door. This is not rocket science.
Yeah, that was Pete Souza said that. He's a photographer. I mean, he's into lighting and all, but I mean,
he brings his own lights, so it's not fair to ask him.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's look at a couple of stories here. I did have the Pundit Roundup from this morning. Chaos and Reality Clash, winner to be determined, based on that discussion from the Ninth Circuit last night. And they're going to take their time, that is to say, in a couple of days, I would think, this week. But not last night. They didn't rule instantly. Mm-hmm. But this is interesting. USA Today, and I see others, have this piece here. Trump critics are writing postcards to President Bannon.
Yes.
An embarrassment, anti-American, chaotic. That word again, you can see a lot about chaos. That's how critics have described former Breitbart News chief Stephen Bannon's performance as an advisor to President Trump over the past 2 weeks. And there's one other epithet, President Bannon, that's being used because everybody knows it gets Trump annoyed. So that's why we do it. We have current Gallup numbers. Disapproval is 54, approval is 42. That's not very good. Disapproval keeps going up. And there was a Quinnipiac poll that came out yesterday, perhaps we'll get to. That was actually pretty lousy numbers for Trump overall on a number of different issues. But before we get to that, there's a couple of things that I want to do first. And first of all, I'm going to have a brief talk about this article that I found in Communication for, the number 4, Health, which I thought was fascinating because it dealt with a topic we've brought up before, but I thought it did it quite well. And that is about advocacy and activism, and talks a little bit more about the differences between the two. Apparently activism is a dirty word based on how people think about activists and how activists are depicted in the media.
I could see that.
They say. Advocacy and activism are tools to create some sort of social and political change. And advocacy is an example of somebody pushing to get a position. This is going to include lobbying, and it's sometimes a special interest group, which may or may not be in the public interest. But the idea, it's speaking, writing, or acting in favor of a cause, a policy, or a group. Activism often has a less favorable reputation, even though by definition it can be seen as the same thing. But the major difference is advocacy is seen working within the system. That's like when I go to CDC or HHS a decade ago and talk to them about how they can do better flu preparedness because it's not reaching the streets, and the hospitals and doctor offices, unlike the Department of Public Health, aren't hearing it, and there aren't getting enough help in terms of being prepared for a flu pandemic. And this is me talking to HHS and CDC, going to the meetings, working within the system, whereas activists are outside the system. And this piece here often points out activists often do what they do because they feel like their voice isn't being heard, and so have to work outside the system and push. And that's what we did when we created FluWiki, the late great FluWiki, because we felt like our voice wasn't being heard within the government. So we were activists on the one hand and advocates on the other. I was pretty comfortable bouncing back and forth between the two. That's not true with everybody. And some people find a natural niche for themselves that feel more comfortable one way or the other. But this idea of activists feeling left out of the public discourse, and that's what pushes them, is important, just as it is for advocates that feel like within the system there's stuff that they could do. So you need both. Sometimes people can be both, but more often than not you feel like it's one or the other. And that's part of the how you go about doing things. As to the why, there's a very interesting NPR article here called "The Theory That Explains the Anger of Our Political Moment." Pretty intensive title, right?
Yes.
Suddenly, people are more in favor of the Affordable Care Act than against it. For the first time, people believe Obamacare is a good idea more than think it's a bad idea. Another poll from Fox News shows something similar. CNN ORC poll shows last-minute love for Obamacare, says CNN. And it may be that there's for a couple of reasons. Maybe that growing participation in Obamacare has tipped the polls. It may be that Democrats' messaging finally is sinking in. But a particularly compelling theory could mix in with either or both of these, and that's called relative deprivation.
Okay.
Yeah, a really fancy term for like, listen, you have something, I'm taking it away from you, now you care about it more.
Yeah, not just relatives.
Yeah. Not just some of our deprived relatives and some of our depraved relatives. Relative deprivation describes being deprived of something a person feels entitled to. For example, they used to have it, expected to have it, see that others have it, and that theory explains this political moment of anger in America. Whether it's Obamacare, why people are marching in the streets to protest the new president, and even why Trump won in the first place.
Yes.
So back in 1970, there's this book by Theodore Gurr, G-U-R-R, Gurr,
really?
Okay. Theorized in his 70 book, Why Men Rebel. That gap between what people think they should get and what they think they will realistically get creates discontent, and discontent is the basic instigating condition for participants in collective violence.
Okay.
But even if it's not violence, even if it's just political action, here's an example. Restaurant employee advocate, not activist, Saru Jayaraman told the Washington Post about the pain workers feel when they lose existing benefits. She says very few restaurant workers before the ACA had anything at all. When you have insurance and then you start to deal and treat things that have been a problem and then cut it off, it's almost worse.
Yes.
So that's the point.
I can buy that.
And so what happens is suddenly the fear of losing Obamacare has grown big enough to Trump, get that? Trump ambivalence about the law.
Write that down. Trump.
Okay. Trump things. Relative deprivation was a major strategy for Trump. Maybe not the most mind-blowing of theories, but it worked for him. And Emily Cala-Gade invoked the idea of relative deprivation this week at the Washington Post Monkey Cage, explaining why she thinks the Women's March had such strong appeal. People took to the streets on Saturday not because of new issues, but because values and protections they thought they could safely rely upon were under threat. Now, white men especially those who have lost economic clout, have felt this for years, as we all know, the economic, insecurity stuff that people talk about. And here's a quote. Revolutions are made not by those with nothing left to lose, but precisely by those with something to lose, in a fear they are, in fact, about to lose it. So everybody gets mad because they think that they're losing something that they used to have, like democracy, America, freedom, whatever. And these fit right in with those shared values that we were talking about on Monday's show. Honesty, rule of law, competence. Those are the ones we identified.
Yes.
People care about those. And if you try to take them away, they get upset and they go out and they protest and sometimes they vote. So, if it's really under threat, then I think Republicans have a lot to fear about 2018.
Well, that would be nice. I wouldn't mind giving them something to fear.
Mm-hmm. Here's a piece by Corey Robin. Who benefits from Trump's chaos? Chaos, that word again. Elites have always used the climate of fear to push their own agendas. And by elites, figures of influence who want to control the lion's share of power and resources. These are the people who are well positioned to act politically on their own in society's behalf. So that's why we fear the whole Trump pivot, not to normalization, but rather pivot to Richard Nixon's Law and Order, LAWN space ORDER, strategy of trying to hope for violent demonstrations so then he can invoke the silent majority's fear of disorder to back him so a strong leader can make things right. We worry about that because, there's no reason why it can't happen. Now, here's a funny thing. I was chatting with some conservatives this morning and yesterday, Tom Nichols and some of our own commenters at Daily Kos, and it occurs to me that there's an interesting dichotomy between conservatives and liberals and progressives when we look at this. We tend to think of people as basically good, but institutions as suspect.
Okay.
That's a good judge. But, the judiciary could just as easily, like in Alabama with Roy Moore, be used to suppress as anything else.
Right. Throw the bums out, not my guy.
And conservatives tend to see people as failed and flawed, but like the institutions.
Huh.
So they're perfectly okay to say, well, you can't attack the judiciary, that's bad. You can't attack the police, that's bad. Yeah, there's individual police that stink, but people are flawed. Institution, leave it be.
It's funny, that's changing a bit, isn't it?
It is, but that's the basic framework.
Usually.
And I think that because when you try to talk to conservatives about stuff like that, you have to keep it in mind because, for example, you'll say, Bannon is really bad. Yeah, I get it. People are bad. I can get that Bannon is bad. And then we'll say, yeah, well, you have to do something about it because he's a threat. And they'll say, no, the institutions are so strong that would never happen. That is a very common discussion we have online. And so you have to step back and say, okay, well, you have a lot of faith in institutions. However, there's this, that, and then this happened. And look what's happening with, for example, ICE and Border Patrol and how they absolutely positively wrap their arms about enforcing as fast as possible something that didn't make any sense. And you had this institutional handcuffing of 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
Institutional. Because the law said that that's what you were supposed to do, and they were fine with it. A big article in the Baltimore Sun about that. I have that in the Pundit Roundup. But that's scary, not good. And there's an example of, well, if you have faith in the institution, you're more likely to accept things that you wouldn't accept from individuals. Baltimore Sun's title is Ordinary Americans Carried Out Inhumane Acts for Trump, and they're talking about, what happened at Dulles and other places. Mm-hmm. Separating families, detaining them without food, handcuffed when you go to the bathroom, that sort of thing. And it's done from an institutional point of view. And if you have a lot of faith in the institutions, unfortunately, you're more likely to accept that. So that's part of the conservative-liberal dialogue we have because we do need, I think, allies without shaming them. And so just, having a sense of the framework as to how to discuss these things, I think, is helpful.
Well, it always used to be, anyway.
It used to be, right? Exactly.
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, as you were describing the what used to be the basic default positions of liberals and conservatives. I mean, there's an awful lot of, and maybe it's just that Trump supporters just aren't really traditional conservatives, and we've certainly had every indication that might be true.
Yeah.
I mean, their trust in institutions is gone, but from a very different perspective. It's very strange.
There's a relatively conservative-leaning website called Lawfare blog.
Yes.
Benjamin Wittes and other people right there.
Yes.
And they had a piece that I put up on the Pundit Roundup today, which was about the shift and the drift about which violent extremists are going to be looked at by the Trump administration.
Yes.
And just a quick quote from it. Apart from Spicer's comments at the press briefing, which noted that Trump, quote, offered his condolences and thoughts and prayers, end quotes, to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and pledged support to Canadian law enforcement and intelligence agencies, neither the White House nor the President, in his individual capacity, has denounced the attack or publicly expressed sympathy with the victims and their families. This was a white nationalist attack by a Trump supporter. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean all Trump supporters are violent. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that he tends to, if it's Muslim, you can bet that he'll blast it out.
Oh, yes.
And if it's a white nationalist, I forgot about that one.
Right. He'll guess that it's a Muslim before we know.
Yeah, and then ignore the fact that he wasn't right because he only tells you when he is. This conspicuous silence is all the more notable given the recent news that the Trump administration plans to revamp and rename the Countering Violent Extremism, CVE, program into something called Countering Islamic Extremism, or perhaps Countering Radical Islamic Extremism, and intentionally exclude right-wing extremists from the program's scope. As J.M. Berger wrote last week in the Washington Post, CVE, as it now stands, has given scant attention to violent ideologies outside militant Islamism, but explicitly abandoning this supposedly equal opportunity approach would be a powerful symbolic statement. Well, that seems straightforward enough, but Quinta Jurczyk, who is the author of that piece, when I tweeted it around this morning, tweeted, "When Daily Kos cites Lawfare blog, truly we are through the looking glass." And I said, look, by the way, the piece and many of the others there are terrific. Because we read everything, consider it all. This isn't new. Trump breaking norms is. Mm-hmm. And she wrote back and said, thanks, should be clear, didn't mean to denigrate your work at all, just marveling at the new bedfellows we've all found. And I said, well, quoting Atrios, we like being educated.
Right. And dead.
And dead. But, the fact of the matter is, there is a lot of cross-discussion between never-Trumpers and reasonable conservatives and people who will at least listen. And, part of the theme that I talked about on Monday and I'm talking about today is just being aware of how to talk to conservatives is kind of a useful tool. Use it when you feel like you need it. If you're going to be an advocate, you're going to try and do this. If you're going to be an activist, maybe you'll just do it in their face, but you need both. And that's really the summary of my presentation today. And now I'm going to take it to the practical, having done the theoretic, and talk about the science march.
Oh, yes, okay.
So now we have this scientists' march on Washington, and it's really difficult.
I just had an idea. The hats were so successful for the Women's March. Can they get propeller beanies?
They are thinking about hats.
There you go. I'm telling you.
They actually are thinking about hats, but whether they're propeller beanies or not, I don't know.
All right.
But here's an article from Vox that kind of talks about it a little bit, and I think it's really helpful because it talks about the pros and cons of this whole thing.
Okay.
Scientists are going to march on Washington. Here's why that's awkward.
Aww.
The scientific community has long been wary of politics, but that's changing. What is this? It's a discussion about how advocates who usually are working within the system are now being pushed to be activists, and it's not an easy transition.
Okay.
It may be a necessary one. So the assurance of making the government work better is gone. Trump has plans to dismantle EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, Food and Drug Agency regulations, withdraw from Paris Climate Agreement, little regard for consulting experts, And with Trump in the Oval Office, scientists are afraid of losing their seat, and perhaps permanently, at the nation's decision-making tables, and they're starting to take action. So we've seen mobilization. Now, the case for a march is simple. It's to send the message that we need to have decisions being made based on a thoughtful evaluation of evidence. So,
yes.
Earth Day, April 22nd, that's the date. And they send a message, and it's an opportunity to create what we call collective identity, says a sociologist, Dana Fisher, who studies protest movements. It's about getting sympathizers, people who agree with the cause, to be activists. So the whole point of the march, really, is to get the advocates to be activists. And then people who show up at the march may go on to do further actions. We get that. We understand that. We're activists ourselves at times.
Mm-hmm.
But we're also advocates at times. And here's the case against the March for Science.
Okay.
A problem that the march organizers can't avoid. What messages the marchers bring with them? If marchers show up wearing I'm with her t-shirts, or if large numbers come with signs advocating for abortion rights, conservatives who read news coverage about the march may be more inclined to dismiss it. Again, this is about talking to conservatives as well as ourselves. It won't matter if there's truly a diversity of views on display. All it takes is one photo to solidify an impression. Go back to that advocates versus activists. Everybody knows activists are angry.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They do things. You know, what if somebody sets a car on fire? What if it's a police provocateur from Trump? These are the dangers that you have with putting together something like this. And at the same part, what if you have people who really aren't necessarily at the core of what the march is about? It says here, already people are interested in the march are knitting brain caps and think caps. A not so subtle nod to the pussy hats on display at the Women's March. And the march organizers hear this concern. They worry about, should we be there as individuals or should we be there as organizations? As organizations, they're very wary. Institutions pride themselves on nonpartisan advocacy. Now you're asking them to be activists. So if you ask the American Chemical Society or the American Geophysical Union or people of that sort to, join AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Science, which I'm a member of, are they going to do it? They're still considering it because they don't necessarily want to rush in and throw away their nonpartisan advocacy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of them are saying you have to separate what an individual can be from a scientific society, and they are struggling with this. So that's on the one hand. And then on the other one. So I think these are things that, really they have to struggle with a little bit, and they haven't quite figured out. What they have figured out, though, is that rather than just do a march and get a lot of publicity and then maybe have the wrong publicity, it's much better to do something different. Most people don't know a scientist, so there's this great hashtag, for example, on Twitter called Actual Living Scientist. And they just, have individual examples of individual people, read a few. Hi, I'm JP. I'm an actual living scientist. I happen to be an LGBT scientist. And I study marine microbes from the Pacific to the Atlantic to the Arctic, and here I am in the Arctic. And I'm Priya, and I study how climate change affects ocean critters. I love coffee, Thai food, and yoga. And they show pictures of actual scientists out in their environment, not in the zoo, but out there in the wild, doing the things that scientists do. It's very cool. And it actually says, okay, well, that's what scientists do. That's a really cool project. This is a really cool project. You humanize it. And so doing that, I think, as a outcome of this march, in the end, is going to do a lot more than the march itself will, I think.
Well, that wouldn't be a bad thing. And
it's
interesting. That's I guess that's probably true that most people don't, know a scientist. Is this is this a reverse of the pickup truck question?
It is. It's exactly reverse. And it's like, look, these scientists are just like us. The thing is, you can't be elite front row seat kids, as Chris Arnold likes to call them, and relate to everybody. Much better to be your sister, your brother. I could have been doing this. I know somebody in high school who went there. Then we're the elites who sit on Wall Street and take your house and, screw up your mortgage.
I guess, yes.
You can't have that kind of distance. You have to make it much more close to home. I do research in your area. I'm out here in jeans in a pickup truck, and I'm getting dirty, and I'm doing stuff that you can relate to. I'm picking up shovels and looking for dinosaur bones, but, I'm digging.
Right.
I'm not in a desk somewhere looking at a computer, pushing a button where when I push that button and click that little program, you lose your house.
Yeah. Although the true elites don't touch the computers either.
I'm just saying. So I think it's important to do that. And I think that, it's probably better to have the resistance come from individuals than institutions.
Yes.
Because, institutions are tricky things. So the institutions themselves are going to have reticence.
Yes.
The individuals are free to speak up and say what they wish. The individuals are like us. We are not institutions. We don't trust institutions. So for all of those reasons, I think it's terrific, to have a human face in all of this.
Yes. All right. Well, I would say abandon the brain hat knitting, but the propeller beanie thing has some potential. Right. We'll see. It'll be very interesting to see how they organize and whether or not organizations take a formal or leading role in all of this and how they express themselves. I think it'll be very difficult, though, to lay. It would be. You don't think it would be tough to lay any potential violence, whether it's provocateurs or plants or what? It seems like a tough thing to pull off. Yeah, the scientists went crazy.
Well, if it's just Starbucks. Putting a car on fire, maybe not. But if it's a spectacular implosion, or maybe a death ray disappears, so you might blame the scientists.
That could be something. If you shrink everybody, the police
exactly.
to
For example,
5
you
inches
do that,
high.
or somehow a wormhole opens up and stuff comes in. You're going to blame the scientists. Right?
That I might do, but then. Wouldn't you be afraid to go too far? Like, I blame you, but it's okay. I mean, I think you did it. I'm just saying.
I, for one, welcome our science overlords.
Yeah, exactly.
If they can do that, I'm just going to go quietly home and have some coffee.
If you dissolve a limousine, I might say, the chemists were at it. But, yeah, I would think, lighting garbage cans on fire and taking pictures of it, as was the case at the inauguration. It would be awfully difficult, I think, to convince people, even people who would be opposed to the march, that the scientists did this.
Right. Now, here's another idea, looking at just the scientist, or not the scientist, but the individual versus the institution. Take our new education secretary, Betsy DeVos, please.
Yes.
Take.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Then what?
So, if individuals are free, the bigger frame. So, what does drain the swamp mean? There's nothing wrong with the institution to a conservative. You just have to swap out bad people for good people.
Okay.
Because they think people are bad, but institutions are good. So they have no issue with, Trump comes in and he throws out the Obama people who are obviously bad, and they put in Trump people who are obviously good because they're Trump people. And so they have no problem with this. And we, who look at it as the people are good, it's the institutions that are bad. We want regulation. We want, to put in stuff, checks and balances to make sure that the institution can't do X, Y, and Z. Completely different approach than the conservatives have.
Yeah.
So if you just let the individuals do anything and throw $5.1 billion around, like Betsy DeVos does, then you get more of them. So we don't want to completely empower. What I'm saying is there needs to be a balance between the individuals and the institutions. It can't just be individuals can do whatever they want. Then you get Betsy DeVos. It can't be that the institutions do whatever they want, because then you get Wall Street and banksters. So there has to be some kind of proper balance between the strength of those two things. That was the whole idea about unions having a check and balance on the corporate world.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's not what it used to be, and people don't accept that anymore, but it's still part of the same concept here. So what I'm saying is what we're really looking for is proper balance between all of these forces. We're not looking to throw everything out. I just say that to my fellow Americans who happen to also be conservatives, that we're not out to trash everything that you hold near and dear. There are common values and shared values that I think we can work with here. and we'll see what happens going forward. And that's my summary for today.
All right. I won't
How's that
trash
strike you?
everything. That's a good starting point. I won't trash everything you hold near and dear. I will decide on a case-by-case basis
Yeah, what I despise
of
about
your
it.
things you hold near and dear not to trash.
Exactly right. Now, let me just finish with that Quinnipiac poll that I promised I was going to get to. Because it is pretty interesting. It's one of many, and of course, you can't take too much from it, but it's just a snapshot of where we are right now, and I think it's kind of good. And the title is American Voters Oppose Trump Immigration Ban. Big gender gap as voters disapprove of Trump. I like the headline.
Okay.
American voters opposed 51 to 46 Trump's order suspending for 90 days all travel to the U.S. from 7 nations. They opposed 60 to 37 the order suspending immigration of all refugees. Voters opposed 70 to 26 Trump's order suspending indefinitely all immigration of Syrian refugees.
Yeah.
And 38% say Trump will make the nation more safe with this. 39% say it will make it less safe, and 21% have no idea what's going on and what's today. The executive order on immigration is intended to be a ban on Muslims. Voters say 51 to 45, so the Trump administration is losing that argument.
Well, they keep making it, but okay.
But they're losing it, and that's important. Okay.
Good.
And then this is at the same time that 70% of Americans say it's likely or somewhat likely that there's going to be a terrorist attack with a large loss of life. So they understand that these things are going to happen anyway, but this isn't the solution.
Yes. New theory is circulating, by the way, that Trump is actually, that's exactly what he's rooting for, which is problematic when you're the president.
Yeah, but again, it's that Richard Nixon law and order thing.
Yeah.
American voters give President Trump a negative 42.51% approval rating. That's very similar to Gallup. Men approve 50 to 43. Women disapprove 58 to 35. That is a huge gender gap. And he gets personal favorability, 43-52 negative. But looking at Trump's personal qualities, this is interesting. 54-42 say he's not honest. Remember, honesty is a shared value.
True.
50-47, he doesn't have good leadership skills. 52-45, he does not care about average Americans. 60 to 35, he's not level-headed. They do think he's strong, 70 to 26. And 65 to 31 say he's intelligent. We're going to have to fix that one. But 58 to 38 say he does not share their values.
Okay. Now, I understand while we were speaking, Trump himself was speaking, and part of the speech was insisting that he was intelligent. So he's working to bolster those numbers.
Oh, good. So they disapprove 56-38 how he's handling foreign policy. 44 to 49 disapprove of handling terrorism. And disapprove 56-41 handling immigration issues. And this is a poll from yesterday. I'm just saying that you can't look at what Trump is doing and say, oh, well, everybody's going to rally around him. That's not happening. That's not true. So just keep that in mind as we look at the whole big picture. He has and is starting out with a historically low approval ratings for somebody at this stage of the presidency, which is like 2.5 weeks in. And he's not winning new converts. You know, he's keeping his base. We all get that for the moment. But everybody else says, I don't know. And people who oppose him are just opposing him more and more and more and more. And it's really getting them angry. And they're out in the street. And I think that has implications for what happens 2 years from now at election time. So there's the story. Thank you so much. This is Greg Dworkin speaking to my friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning. If Armando has time, he can come on maybe and talk more about exactly what happened at that hearing, which, again, I'm listening to as a layman. And besides, there's always plenty of time for him to come on and tell us why I'm wrong. Take care, and I will talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, we'll do that. Thanks very much. Yeah, it's an odd schedule. Everyone wants to think Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, just to shake things up.
Yep.
Okay, thanks very much, Greg.
I'm into the chaos, you know.
Yeah, this is a very Greg Dworkin version of chaos. Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. Ha ha! There you go.
Well, you know, it's the whole thing. It's the whole show. It's the whole concept.
Right.
And in fact, I will point out, as I often do, that as far as what's going to be on the rest of the show, I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, I really don't. Today is a very confusing day. I'm really at a loss. So we'll
welcome to 2 hours of chaos, otherwise known as Kagro in the morning.
I know,
but we'll organize it for you, and we'll make it fun. Take care.
Okay.
And I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks very much, Greg. We'll do that. Yeah, well, I'm not sure why chaos bothers me so much, but I think it may have to do with the fact that there's no process for dealing with this chaos. I can't sort it out. Seriously, there's a million things, and there always are a million things. It's my constant complaint. But, I mean, Trump is on TV now, I guess. I didn't even see it. So if any of you saw it, you're going to have to send me. I don't think there's any coverage yet. But, oh, my God, it's just all over the place. Anyway, I guess Trump was on this TV this morning complaining. I think he started out by complaining about the hearing on the Muslim ban last night, which, again, Armando insisted ought to be considered one of the top stories, and it should be. It's just I don't have that much to offer on it because I didn't get to watch it. But maybe, Armando, if you did and you have a couple of comments, by all means, join us and let us know. And this morning, maybe you're captivated by what's going on this morning, he's complaining about it now, which is astounding, not just because he doesn't know anything about the legal aspects of this, but he's complaining now about a case that's, how many times have we heard in speaking to government officials, well, I'm not going to comment on a case that's currently pending. He's screaming about the case and the judges and the way they're treating his stupid policy while they're they've just had this hearing last night. It's a hot issue for these guys. I mean, this is just terrible litigation strategy. I don't expect him to know anything about litigation or strategy other than, his usual civil litigation strategy, sue people until they surrender. But wow. This is, it's unpresidential, I guess is the best capper you can put on it. So anyway, I mean, that's going on. There's 1,000 things. Another of the most discussed issues of last night. Wow, let's see. Where should I start? Let's see. Lots of tweeting around of the Huffington Post story early in the evening yesterday and continuing this morning, if I have the correct one here. Yes, yet more leaks from inside the Trump administration, essentially reminding us all that he's off his rocker. This is a piece from, let's see, we got Christina Wilkie on this and SV Date on it, and I think it is Date. I think I saw a video of him on HuffPost Live pronouncing his name that way, so I think I've got that right. Leaks suggest Trump's own team is alarmed by his conduct. White House leaks are common, but leakers are suggesting the president might be unfit for office. Leaks that suggest that are usually not all that common. And so all the latest stories that people are talking about are contained herein. Let's run through this a little bit. President Donald Trump, was still weird to say that, was confused about the dollar. This was amazing. How could Donald Trump have been confused about the dollar? That's the one thing he's supposed to not be confused about at all. But he's confused about the dollar. Was it a strong one that's good for the economy or a weak one? And of course, I guess the answer really is that in some cases a strong dollar is helpful, and in some cases a weak dollar is helpful. But overall, for the economy, I don't even know what kind of question that is. But it doesn't matter because he's got advisors, right? The president doesn't need to know this himself, so you can call your economic advisors. Doesn't have any. He called, long story short, he called Mike Flynn, the national security advisor, and apparently at something like 3 a.m, I guess I should just read the story. It asks the national security advisor, is it a strong dollar that's good or a weak dollar that's good for the economy? And he just, I don't know. Ask an economist. What are you calling me for? Bizarre. So he makes the call, except, as he says, not to any of the business leaders Trump brought into his administration or even to an old friend from his days in real estate. Instead, he called his national security advisor, retired Lieutenant General Mike Flynn. According to two sources familiar with Flynn's account of the incident, Flynn has a long record in counterintelligence, but not macroeconomics. And he told Trump he didn't know, that it wasn't his area of expertise, and that perhaps Trump should ask an economist instead. Trump was not thrilled with that response. What do you mean you don't know? I hire you to know things. But that may have been a function of the time of day. Trump had placed the call at 3 a.m., according to one of Flynn's retellings. although neither the White House nor Flynn's office responded to requests for confirmation about that detail. For Americans who base their impression of Trump on the competent and decisive tycoon he portrayed on his Apprentice TV reality shows, which we learned, of course, here on the show, were in fact heavily edited and retrofitted to make it look like he was that, and they came that close to simply making it a comedy show about how he was not. Remember that. The portrait from these and many other tidbits emerging from this administration may seem a shock. An impulsive, sometimes petty chief executive, more concerned with the adulation of the nation than the details of his own policies, and quick to assign blame when things do not go his way. Unsurprisingly, Trump's volatile behavior has created an environment ripe for leaks from his executive agencies and even within his White House. And while leaks typically involve staffers sabotaging each other to improve their own standing, or trying to scuttle policy ideas they find genuinely problematic, Trump's 2-week-old administration has a third category: leaks from the White House and agency officials alarmed by the president's conduct. I've been in this town, remember that? I've been in this town for 26 years. I have never seen anything like this, said Elliot Cohen, a senior State Department official under President George W. Bush and a member of the National Security Council under Bush as well. I genuinely do not think this is a mentally healthy president. Yow. There is the matter of Trump's briefing materials, for example. The commander-in-chief doesn't like to read long memos. A White House aide who asked him to remain unnamed told the Huffington Post. So preferably, they must be no more than a single page. Even, who was the 3-page bill guy? Was that Herman Cain? His idea? I can't even remember. But what this guy wants it in one page. The President of the United States. I understand not wanting to read long memos. I don't want to read long memos. But on the other hand, if I signed up to be President of the United States, I'd say this job will probably involve a lot more reading than I'm happy about. But it's a tough job. I'll take it. One page. There are things that it's impossible. Not only that, it says they must have bullet points. It's not even a single typed page. You can't, I'll cram whatever I can into one page. No, bullet points. But not more than 9 per page. So one page, bullet pointed, large type. Not a cranky old man in the least. Oh, I understand things. I comprehend really good, is what he spent his morning saying. Small things can provide him great joy or generate intense irritation. Trump told the New York Times that he's fascinated with the phone system inside the White House. And I've had a couple of our friends and listeners remind me he probably enjoys that because it reminds him of the fascinating phone system that he had installed at Mar-a-Lago where he could listen in on everybody's conversations. He was. I remember him saying, though, that he was fascinated by the phone system in the White House. Beautiful phones, he had to say. But at the same time, he's registered a complaint about the hand towels aboard Air Force One, the White House aide said, because they are not soft enough. And I had to add, editorial comment. He also thinks they're gigantic, which is problematic too. Hand towels very small. If your hands are very small, see, relatively speaking. But I mean, that's your everyday American problem. You know what really pisses me off about the flights I've been taking? The hand towels. They're not soft enough. Of course, the rest of America says hand towels. What? When I get on a plane, it's trifold, cardboard, paper towels out of the dispenser. Hand towels. Your hand towels aren't soft enough? Let me soften it up for you, a rat tail. You're lame ass. All right. Well, that's what he's concerned about. The hand towels aren't soft enough. But so far, I guess he's happy with the M&Ms on there. He's been particularly obsessed with the performance of his aides on cable television. Past presidents typically didn't make time to watch their press secretary's daily briefings with reporters, but Trump appears to have made it a part of his routine. Saturday Night Live's weekly skewering of his administration is similarly on his must-watch list, with his reaction ranging from unamused to seething. Yeah, and word is now that he really, really wants Sean Spicer gone and blames Reince Priebus for forcing him to take him on. This guy's nuts. Information about Trump's personal interactions and the inner workings of his administration have come to Huffington Post from individuals in executive agencies and in the White House itself. They spoke on condition of anonymity for fear of losing their jobs, which you should stop fearing because you're all losing your jobs soon. While some of the leaks are based on opposition to his policies, the travel ban on all refugees and on visitors from 7 predominantly Muslim nations, for instance, many appear motivated by a belief that Trump's words, deeds, and tweets pose a genuine threat. When Trump tweeted about North Korea's missile technology 3 weeks before he took office, for example, it scrambled then-President Barack Obama's national security apparatus, which saw a risk in provoking an unstable young dictator who possessed nuclear weapons. You guys misspelled old there. Oh, you're talking about the Korean. And the unstable old dictator who has our nuclear weapons and the unstable young dictator who has theirs. Presumably. Richard Nephew, a State Department expert on Iran sanctions under Obama, said some of the leaks from the agencies are likely efforts to let the public know that their advice has not been followed in the event something bad happens down the road. This, I think, is about making it clear that these folks have tried to do the right thing and there's only so much they can do with a hostile administration, Nephew said. Perhaps along these lines, the AP reported the details of a phone call January 27th between Trump and Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto, noting that Trump said Mexico had bad hombres. I can't believe he actually said hombres to them, too. And that he might need to send U.S. troops to take care of things. The White House later said that Trump had been joking around. The Washington Post detailed the January 28th conversation between Trump and the Australian PM, remember that one, in which Trump angrily denounced an agreement to resettle refugees held by Australia in the United States. The refugees would be resettled here. They're not being held by them here. All right. The New York Times, meanwhile, painted a portrait of a brooding commander-in-chief wandering the White House alone in a bathrobe at night, watching too much cable television and venting his frustrations through angry tweets. And remember which part of that one they disputed? The bathrobe. Seriously. I'm not even kidding. By the way, also on the record this morning is word that he had yet another problematic phone call with a world leader, this time with the French president. And we'll see if we can grab that report and add that. Anyway, we'll continue with this one here. The brooding commander-in-chief in the bathrobe. I think it's a cry for help, said Elizabeth Rosenberg, a counterterrorism expert, and perhaps not a psychiatrist, at the Treasury Department under Obama. She said many staffers still working in the national security agencies under Trump see what's happening and are driven by a simple motive, incredulity and the need to share it. The White House has denied many of these accounts, including the idea that Trump owns, let alone wears, a bathrobe. Others, I can't believe that was the subject they took up. Others dispute the premise that Trump staffers undermining his competence is unusual. Ron Kaufman, who worked in George H.W. Bush's White House in the late 80s and early 1990s, argued that the Trump administration's leaks are par for the course for a young administration. There's always leaks. Every president in history has said the press hates me and there's too many leaks. And Republican National Committee member Randy Evans, a veteran of Newt Gingrich's leak-prone House Speaker's suite in the 1990s, said he doesn't get that sense that Trump's staffers are questioning his fitness for the job. Not yet, anyway, Evans said. We're just too early in the process. I think you see a lot of political jockeying going around, a lot of self-importance going on. Maybe. But he's less capable and less well-positioned than any president in American history to deal with that. And he follows on the no-drama Obama administration as well. That's a little bit of a tough act to follow if you're not going to clamp down on this stuff. The idea that Trump is temperamentally ill-suited for the presidency is nothing new. It was the main argument against him during both the GOP primaries a year ago and the general election last summer and fall. At times, Trump seemed to embrace the characterization, wearing it as a badge of honor for his status as an anti-establishment outsider. That's interesting. I forgot that the upshot of his, I'm an outsider because we've never had a crazy president before. Anyway, but what were only hypothetical concerns on the campaign trail are now life and death decisions inside the White House. That's the way elections work. When you get elected president and they hand you nuclear weapons, if you're crazy, it's life or death. It's just among his supporters, they didn't really wanna contemplate that, I don't think. Anyway, so yes, they are life and death decisions, as evidenced by the death of a Navy commando in a botched raid in Yemen on January 29th. Good segue to that if we can. Trump approved that raid following a dinner meeting that included his top political advisor, Bannon, of course, whose permanent membership on the NSC was itself the basis of widespread leaks and warnings from the national security establishment, and apparently a surprise to Trump as well. The intelligence community is desperately looking for a way to get some leverage in altering dangerous policies away from a catastrophic vector, said Rick Wilson, former Pentagon official with intelligence issues who has become a vocal Trump critic. That's poorly worded. Rick Wilson, you have intelligence issues. As part of your portfolio, is what I mean to say. Evans said at some point the White House will have to get serious about harmful leaks if they want to control their message, just as Gingrich's office had to 2 decades ago. I guess he's still dining out on that. He described the method of intentionally releasing tidbits to various staffers to see what turned up in print. He's already laying traps. Here's what, when my boss was plagued by leaks, we set traps for people. You should try traps. Have you tried that? Oh my God. But to Cohen, who now teaches at Johns Hopkins University's School of Advanced International Studies, the problem is not the leakers, it's the president. Because Trump has shown no true affection or respect for anyone outside his immediate family, Cohen said, you're onto something here, he cannot expect that of his staff. This is what happens when you have a narcissist as president. A friendless loser, I think I would add, on top of all that. The guy is, well, you saw, if you're listening to us because you love Daily Kos so much, you likely saw Marcos's piece about Trump being an isolated wacko rattling around in his own bunker all by himself, making 3 a.m. phone calls to the only people he can find to ask him about questions like strong dollar, weak dollar. Here's Joan. Good morning, Joan. How you doing?
Good morning, Kagro. I am fine. How are you?
Okay. I was wondering whether you might be consumed with the action in the Senate this morning, even though nothing of substance happening just yet, but that doesn't matter
curiously,
for you.
yes.
Okay.
Senator Tom Udall just about 30 minutes ago read the full letter from Coretta Scott King about Jeff Sessions on the floor. Nobody said anything.
Interesting. Well, I don't know how well that'll be a very interesting thing to have to analyze. On the one hand, you might say, well, they learned their lesson. On the other hand, of course, there's going to be a lot of people who say, when a woman reads it, holy cow.
Including me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's right in front of your eyes. How could you not ask that question?
Yep.
My guess is that they probably learned their lesson.
My guess is, too, since I think more people got the opportunity to read Coretta Scott King's letter
absolutely
last night and this morning than ever would have happened had McConnell not shut her up.
Oh, my God. That would have gone unnoticed. I mean, it would have been in the morning write-ups. Yeah. But that's about it.
Yeah.
Now people are
reading
it.
You know how many people are glued to C-SPAN besides us?
Right.
At 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night.
And instead, you're going to have people making T-shirts with what he said about Warren on them. The whole, what was it? She was warned. She was given an explanation. Nevertheless, she persisted. And somebody hit the nail on the head and tweeting, holy crap, dude, I think you just wrote her re-election campaign slogan.
Wendy Davis was tweeting it out this morning. She persisted.
Yeah.
She persisted is going to be the rallying cry of 2018.
Absolutely. So that was rather foolish. I don't know
what he was thinking.
I don't know either. I guess they just were. They're in that mode. Of course, they're in an overnight session because Democrats are in the mode of using every rule that they can to do what they want to do on the floor.
Well, we're in the 30 hours of debate.
Yeah.
Post-cloture on Sessions. So they're using it, and they're going to use it for Price. And what's the third one? I've just lost track.
Did we already do Mnuchin, or is he next?
Yeah, I think it's Mnuchin.
Okay. All right.
Price and then Mnuchin.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, I assume they'll probably use it for almost everybody. Everybody who's left, they've done what they could that was non-controversial. And even that is the wrong terminology for it. I mean, they're not going to fight that hard over some of the things. But they, even in all the cases that they let through, other than the first two that they did on the day of Trump's inauguration, we've had the equivalent of the 30-hour clock running, even without having to do it. So they've managed to make it take as long as they could. And McConnell has done the best he could to try and minimize that by filing 2, 3, 4 cloture petitions all at once so that they all ripen at once, and then keeping them in around the clock to run those 30 hours. But I guess that puts, tempers on edge, and I guess when they're using every rule they can, he'll push back and use every rule he can in trying to just to screw with them. And maybe he thought, if she continues to push, we can actually prohibit her from speaking again on this subject, this cloture, or rather this nomination. And she's one of their more powerful speakers, and maybe it would be a good thing to take her legs out. But
that's all I could think, is that they thought, okay, here's their star. Let's just knock her down a peg or two.
Yeah. Well, it didn't work out that well. And I mean, it was,
that was a miscalculation.
It sets up very badly, especially the fact that, of course, she's reading someone else's words, and a highly respected person's words at that, and that is a matter of historical record. This happened. This isn't fake news. This letter was really written, and it's really been.
It was actually already in the record from the Sessions committee hearing.
Right. Although they did do their best to try and prevent that from being read aloud, but it was printed, and now it's going to be a thing. People, be videoing themselves reading that section and tweeting that around. It was an extraordinarily stupid thing to do, and I think they knew that last night. And I watched some of the Republican senators speak, and they were hinting that they, already regretted having done it. They did it. They voted the way they voted for purely partisan reasons, and some of them 20 minutes, an hour later, were saying, yeah, maybe that was unnecessary.
Yeah, maybe. Although, of course, Idaho Senator Jim Risch, who you never see on the floor unless he gets to talk about tax cuts, and even then rarely, popped up to object to Senator Whitehouse entering the text of the letter into the record.
Yeah, it just became a team thing at that point.
Yeah. I mean, Risch doesn't do anything.
Huh.
We haven't seen him here at home in months.
Wow. Well,
there he was to pop up, and
it was his turn to sit on the floor and object to everything, and he didn't want to mess it up, I guess.
Yes.
So anything he saw that, okay, well, I'll object to that. I watched for a little bit. Most of the action was over by the time I realized what was going on and turned it on. I just watched Marco Rubio make the longest parliamentary inquiry ever.
I know. Was that actually a parliamentary inquiry?
Started that way.
Or was it, another 2020 campaign pitch?
Right. Now, had there been had the shoe been on the other foot, had there been a Democrat in the chair, I think probably about a minute into it, it would have been, does the senator have a parliamentary inquiry? No. And that's okay. I mean, you can make a speech and all, but that was weird. I watched Orrin Hatch with the champions argument.
I had to mute Orrin Hatch. I just can't with him anymore.
How could you say that about him? Think about his wife. What?
What?
She would presumably be embarrassed.
She knows he's a bigot.
Yeah,
she's lived with him all these years.
Maybe that's why they got together. I don't know. But he did have another kind of a weird comment, which was he said, trying to egg on the Democrats a little bit, by with backhanded stuff. Well, I know it was hard for Democrats to lose the election. Nobody thought that Donald Trump was going to win, except me. I did. I knew. He's saying I knew because I knew people were, secretly not speaking up about who they were going to vote for, and that meant they were going to probably vote for Trump. So I knew it was coming, even though none of the rest of you did. But think about the reasons why people voted for Donald Trump. And the reason is they see what we're doing here, tearing each other's throats out here on the floor. They're tired of the partisanship and tired of the rancor. So he was it was his claim that the Trump vote came out the way it did because people were tired of invective and partisanship and attacking one another. Like, Okay. You're talking about Donald Trump, right? Okay. Because that's a little, the hair and everything. Not the cancer doctor, Donald Trump. He's a nice guy. The big hair, Donald Trump.
Donald Trump, cancer doctor.
That's a good show title.
Oh, Lord.
But, yeah, it's, I mean, the idea that people were pro-Trump because they were tired of bitter partisan fights seemed a little absurd. But anyway, I guess it's all, it's winding down. And when are we due for this vote?
Sherrod Brown also just read the letter on the floor.
Yes.
Maybe Mazie Hirono, who's up next, will do so as well.
I hope that she does.
And if Mazie Hirono does it, maybe McConnell will pop up to object.
That would be interesting. If yeah, right. Oh, you know what would be? Now, this is the way to end it. Now, how come I don't run the floor strategy for these guys? But and we might be far worse off if I did. But what we ought to have happen here, or maybe Schumer can do this, is I just want to close out the debate. I have a letter here that I want to read, and everyone will
that
groan
would be
and
perfect.
say, and it's from Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. I don't know who she is, but she's got something to say. And she says that she once read a letter by Coretta Scott King, and it said, now stop me if you've heard this one before. No, kidding. Don't stop me, or you'll get in trouble. But yeah, that would, well, okay. I think that would be fun. But yeah, it was. It certainly drew a lot of attention to something that should have been, and for people who, well, for Republicans and Trump supporters, it would have been an eye roller. Last night's talkathon. They keep trying to insist. Why are they doing this? It's so stupid. Even Hatch, I guess, in last night's debates, said. Questioned why Democrats would be doing this at all. Everybody knows we have the votes. Why don't you just roll over and shut up? It was kind of remarkable for a senator to say ever about any other senators. But we're happy that they're doing what they're doing, and despite the fact that it all ends up in the nominations being confirmed. We do know this, but the more time, again, in case we've missed the strategy to this point, the more time they consume with these things, the less time there's going to be for consideration of substantive legislation, which will be far worse than some of the idiots they're parking in the cabinet spots.
Indeed. It could get just massively, massively worse.
Yes.
Oh, which reminds me of what I just wrote about Mitch McConnell.
Ah, okay. Massively, massively worse. You're right. That would bring him to mind.
He thinks everything is going just wonderfully.
Yes.
I think there's a high level of satisfaction with the new administration, he said. Our members are not obsessed with the daily tweets, but are looking at the results. The results, Trump is going to give them what they want. Tax cuts.
Yeah. That's the
whatever
trend.
they put on his desk, he's going to sign. That's all they need. Never mind the offense to all of our allies. Never mind the middle of the night tweets. Never mind the flirting with a constitutional crisis. Never mind undermining the judiciary. Yeah, that's just all a distraction.
Did you
what really matters is we're going to get tax cuts.
Did you happen to see his... Did Trump speak this morning? I missed it.
I've had the floor on, the Senate floor,
okay.
So I've only seen the tweets that you've been seeing about the Trump speech.
Okay.
So,
but it existed. I wasn't wrong about that.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, okay. So where does this leave us? What are we following today? I mean, I'm lost at this point.
What do you follow when Trump is president?
I don't know.
You can't plan your day.
Yeah, no, it's impossible to imagine what's going to come next
because it could be anything.
Yeah.
I would say, along with Greg, that it would be great to hear Armando tell us about the hearing yesterday.
Yeah, we'll see if we can.
I didn't listen to it. I just read some of the live tweets of it from various lawyers who I respect.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it was a bit of a disaster for the government.
That's what I'm hearing.
I think that a government lawyer probably should never tell a court that they should not have jurisdiction over anything the executive does.
I've heard Alberto Gonzalez say that.
Yeah, and that didn't go over particularly well, did it?
He wasn't on the short list of anybody's anything this time.
Mm-mm. So, it would be really fun to hear what our friend Armando has to say about that one.
Yeah. But we'll see if
apparently, Trump did talk about that again this morning. How the courts are just too darned political.
Yes. And he'll fix that by replacing them with people that will do anything he says, which is, of course, not political. Somehow. Oh, no. Well, let's see. I'm trying to scroll back through your, what you've been covering in the last couple of days. But, I mean, in some ways it all ends up, anything you covered, not you, but everybody, in the last couple of days, pales in comparison to the next insane thing he does. And I guess that's the chaos theory, and it's supposed to keep us constantly stumbling so that he can sneak something by.
And it is. I don't know if really that's the intent, or if that's just, it could be what Bannon wants to have happen. But I think when you've got somebody who really, and I don't like saying this because it's the president, and I am not a mental health professional by any means, but I'm pretty darn sure he's mentally ill. And I'm pretty darn sure everybody in the White House thinks he's mentally ill.
Yeah.
And gosh, it would be nice if somebody on the Republican side recognized that and did something to stem him in a little bit.
It would be nice. I think they have to consider what what sort of decent interval they need.
Yeah.
In order to do it, and what sort of thing would be demonstrative enough that that they wouldn't look weird or petty. I mean, certainly they could engineer a process that would make it possible. I think that 25th Amendment is a great out for them, especially if they just simply say it's not that he's done things that are wrong, it's that he's ill and he should be able to retire. And he told us who we wanted to replace him. We have the guy here. Pence can be president, and we'll give him a Medal of Freedom and go home.
In the meantime, I think that in the White House, here's what they need to do. Oh my goodness, I'm getting a phone call.
Oh.
I think they need to get actors to call him pretending to be heads of state or heads of state, so he can have his phone conversations with them, and then they get an actor pretending to be him to call the real foreign heads of state so that we don't have any more of those problematic issues.
So somebody who can, you'd have to be able to do a quality Donald Trump imitation. It wouldn't matter if you can't do the imitation of another foreign leader. He won't know the difference. Right. So you would probably have to do something super stereotypical. If you're the French president or supposed to be, you'd have to call up with some kind of crazy French accent. Bonjour, hello my friend, how are you? Otherwise he would never believe it. You don't sound French. So, and he just did have, where did I grab that? There was another phone call with the French, was it French president or prime minister? I don't know. I forgot to grab the article, but again,
we've got it pasted in our Slack. Let me see. It was...
That's what I should be having Slack open
French President François Hollande.
Okay, excellent. And
veered off into rants about the U.S. getting shaken down by other countries.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
And the towels.
This was back on January 28th.
Okay, so we didn't even hear about that until now. That was the least problematic of his foreign phone calls.
He used the exchange to vent about his personal fixations, including his belief that the United States is being taken advantage of by China and by international bodies like NATO. At one point, Trump declared that the French can continue protecting NATO, but the U.S. wants our money back, the official said, adding that Trump seemed to be obsessing over money.
Huh.
And then,
all right.
Here's the point of the article.
Oh.
The trick to a good call with Trump is less about policy agreement than personal chemistry, said two people familiar with the word leader talks.
Okay.
When the politics and personalities mesh, the calls can become mutual admiration societies.
Aha.
As was the case with Trump's call during the transition with Miloš Zeman, the president of the Czech Republic. Zeman is a hardliner on both immigration and Iran, and he and Trump found common ground on those issues, but hit it off personally in a big way. Trump told Zeman, "You're my type of guy," and invited him to the White House repeatedly during the course of the conversation.
Please, I'm all alone here. Oh no! Well, I mean, I guess if you heap praise on him is what that's quietly saying. If you call up and say you're great, you're strong, your hair is fantastic, then you'll get along with him, and he'll say the same about you. Which is, I mean, I guess again, he told us flat out in the campaign that's what it was all about with him. I like Putin. I don't love Putin. He says nice things about me, so I say nice things about him. So I guess really that's it. That's all there is to it. He didn't ask him anything else, huh? And the so it took a week to find out about the call with the French president. That's interesting in itself. And then this is the first I've heard of his talking to the Czech president, prime minister,
President. I think.
Yeah, I guess the prime ministers for the most part are not talking to him. I don't know. That's all they've got in Australia, I guess. But does Australia have a president? They don't have a president, do they?
They have a prime minister. Yeah.
I mean, some countries have both, but
I really should be memorizing all of this stuff.
I guess so, because who knows? You may
Along
end
with
up being
relearning
president.
Russian and
yeah.
I don't know what all.
Brush up on
Oh my
everything.
goodness.
Well, okay. That's pretty amazing. But you're right. They really should just shield him from it entirely. He'd have no idea whether he was talking to the real thing. And yeah, I guess even if you had an actor portray him and call these foreign heads of state, there's a danger that Donald Trump himself would say, "Now I want to call, the prime minister of whatever. Don't worry about it. We've taken care of it." No, I want to be put through. Didn't I just speak to you? The prime minister says. What? No. Oh, they could gaslight him that way. Wow.
They could gaslight him.
Then he would come to doubt his own sanity and say, "You're right. I should be out of here."
That'll never happen.
No, he would never doubt himself.
No.
Okay, well.
Late breaking for you.
Yes?
Mark Sumner. He's such a good person.
That I
actually
knew.
Transcribed some of Trump's appearance this morning.
Oh, excellent. Has he posted it, or is he getting ready to?
He's getting ready to.
Okay.
This is for the security of the country, which, again, you're the chiefs, you're the sheriffs, you understand this. And I listened to the lawyers on both sides last night, and they were talking about things that just had nothing to do with it. I listened to a panel of judges. I'll comment on that. I won't comment on the statements made by certainly one judge, but I have to be honest that if these judges wanted to, in my opinion, help the court in terms of respect for the court, they do what they should be doing. I mean, it's so sad. A bad high school student would understand this.
That is not only substantively horrible, but it's poorly said.
Yes. In my opinion, help the court in terms of respect for the court. They do what they should be doing.
Yes. So every court session should open with, "We have some problems here to discuss about the Trump administration," which, by the way, has got fantastic hair nonetheless and is a great guy still and all. You know how it is with lawyers. We got to step out of the room. We have the lawyers need to talk, honey. All right. And I guess maybe he'll allow them to go on if they praise him enough. But that's
my God, look at those hands. Gorgeous.
And gigantic as well. I don't know why they dwarf the hand towels on Air Force One. Apparently, this is very disturbing in itself. But he's talking. Is he again with chiefs of police and sheriffs this morning?
Yes.
Wasn't he with them yesterday?
Yes.
He can't get these guys out of the house.
They're the only people who love him.
I guess that's it. So he's going to meet with every chief of police and every sheriff in the country in groups of 10 or 15 for the rest of his administration. Yesterday's crazy morning comments when he had another batch of these guys around, wasn't it that one of them from Texas said he was having particular difficulty with a state legislator back home?
On asset forfeiture.
Yes, that's as it turns out. But Trump's comment was, maybe you want to tell me his name and we'll ruin his career?
Yeah.
Okay.
Destroy.
Yeah, fantastic.
Destroy was the word.
Destroy. Excellent. Well, that's what you want your president doing, destroying the careers of state legislators who, by the way, as you point out correctly, is giving the sheriff a hard time in that he's trying to get rid of a reformed civil asset forfeiture, which is an enormous problem, big enough that, in fact, it attracts bipartisan support for re-examination and maybe the abolishment of the procedure because it offends traditional conservative/libertarian values, seizing property and assets from people who have been convicted of nothing.
Right.
And that sounds like a bad thing.
You haven't gotten to the convicted part when they're seizing these assets.
Right. And you can't because it's civil asset forfeiture. There's no guilt in civil procedure. But okay, do we know who did we ever find out who the state legislator was and whether maybe they might be a Republican? I don't know.
Perhaps, I don't know. I didn't chase it down that far because there were a lot of things to be chasing down yesterday.
I
Go
guess
figure.
Even this sheriff was like, "No, telling you the name that would be crazy."
I know. I
I'm
can't
not doing
do
that,
Mr. President.
Weird. Well, many weird things. Like we said. What else should we shoehorn in? I don't even know which direction to go. There's still a million.
There's still a million directions. What I'll be writing about for the rest of the day is, of course, Obamacare, because I can never not write about Obamacare. And the ongoing difficulty that the Republicans are having with this.
Yes.
The Freedom Caucus is being the Freedom Caucus.
Right.
Repeal it or we'll hold our breath until you do.
Okay.
That seems to be the message from the Freedom Caucus.
Right.
The guy that heads up the Help Committee in the Senate, which is kind of important because that's where legislation has to come from on healthcare, is saying, no, really, we can't repeal this unless we put something in its place.
Yeah, that's still a big problem, and I think the latest that I've been seeing over the past couple of days is that even now Trump's saying this may take a year to figure out what to replace it with. Hello.
Yeah, Trump, it's not this shiny object for Trump. He doesn't really, I don't think, care about it that much.
Yeah, you might be right.
Tom Price, however, does. Tom Price is the dangerous one in this equation, who's going to be confirmed as soon as they finish sessions and after his 30 hours. Despite the fact that he's really a corrupt SOB.
He is. That has not disturbed Republicans in the least, I guess.
No, I haven't seen any concern expressed by any Republican that their colleague has been taking advantage of his position in the Congress to make a killing in stocks.
Yeah. I'm not certain whether that's because they have also, or they just, they're afraid to not give Trump what he wants. I pray that somewhere along the line there's somebody who says, well, I don't know that Price is necessarily long for this world as Trump is, and neither is Trump, and maybe it would be okay to have in my back pocket the corruption charge to say, okay, you go in there and do what we want at HHS, and the minute you get too far out in front of us, we can pull the rug out from under you with the corruption investigation. But I don't know. That's just wishful thinking, I think.
That's wishful thinking, I'm afraid, my friend.
Yes, well, I'm trying to engage in some.
I mean,
as an exercise.
They wouldn't keep Betsy DeVos out of office.
No. Well, they get an awful lot of money from her. But what I didn't get a chance to read, but was highly recommended on the site the other day, was Jen Hayden's piece that had that provocative title. I have to go and look this one up. We'll share it with people later on, or perhaps later in the week. But I like the titling of it. What did she say? That once she was confirmed, these members of Congress, after confirmation, GOP congressmen filed legislation showing the real reason they backed DeVos. So I'd like to find out what that was.
Well, shall we go find it?
Yeah, I've pulled it up here. But it says, just starts right in here. She's not there to manage the Department of Education. She's there to dismantle it. And I guess that's what this is all about. On the same day that the Senate confirmed DeVos, we also find, I guess over in the House, Kentucky Representative Thomas Massey's bill, only one page long, so the president can read it, after merely stating that the Department of Education would terminate on December 31st, 2018. I guess that's the entirety of it's not even a page long, it's a sentence long. It just says the Department of Education ceases to exist December 31st, 2018. And I guess, maybe that was it too. Well, we don't care if she's corrupt, she's just there to bury the body. Maybe? I don't know. I don't think that one flies. They have a good time introducing it and running around saying they did it, but I don't know about passing something like that, especially just flat. That's it. That's the end of the Department of Education, because there's more issues to deal with than that.
Yeah, I don't think that you can just do that.
I mean, I guess you could, but it's not wise management, and the actual winding down of the department would then fall to bureaucrats to do via, well, for one thing, I guess executive order, but they would just handle it through the bureaucratic process. But I mean, what do you do with the assets of the department, the people who work there, the buildings they occupy? And they never think about this stuff. They just go for the big, splashy, it's over, we terminate it, or we repealed Obamacare. What do you do with the people who are sick and dying, or healthy but just want to pay for insurance just in case? I don't know.
Yeah.
Nerds, you do it. So, I don't know. Maybe that's it. So I guess that was it. Their thinking was now that she's there, and has she been explicit in expressing an interest in terminating the Department of Education ever? I don't know if she wants to radically restructure everything, but
I didn't see that. Although, we didn't have a whole lot of time in hearings with her.
No.
They only gave 5 minutes for questions. So yes. I'm not sure that we could actually drill down to that.
Well, they didn't want to make her uncomfortable. She's extraordinarily generous to all the people who control the gavels.
Extraordinarily generous.
Well, we do have this administration does confront us with a lot of unique problems. I don't know if it's ever really been the case, certainly not on the scale of someone like DeVos, that, I mean, surely we've considered cabinet secretaries before who have been donors to the senators who are considering them, largely because very often senators are being considered for these nominations, and they give one another, $5,000 checks from their campaign committees all the time.
Right.
But never anything like this, mostly because nobody nominates, activist donors and billionaires, certainly not at the rate that Donald Trump has done. This is a very weird situation. That and I guess trying to figure out the rules about what to do with Elizabeth Warren and her speech yesterday. How do you consider the nomination fairly of pro and con of all the attributes of a person who happens to be a sitting senator who's up for the job? It's just usually that doesn't happen because you don't nominate people that have such horrible attributes as anything, let alone attorney general. So how do you criticize somebody at all without running afoul of this rule? The answer is depends what mood the other side is in at the moment.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily violate the rules. It only violates the rules if they decide to say that it does. And last night, they decided they were going to say that. This morning, they decided they're not. Same text. So, I don't know. I don't know whether you take away for any rule on it at all, except be aware that somebody could make a big deal out of anything, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know how the parliamentarian might have ruled. I got an inkling last night just from a tweet. I didn't see any sourcing on it that the parliamentarian, I think, suggested that they not do this. But they decided to overrule and do it anyway. But yeah, that would create an enormous problem in honestly evaluating anybody who is up for anything. However, I think that they probably should have said, well, for purposes of this debate, he's not a senator. Is he going to vote on himself? I don't think so. Usually they don't. But,
I don't think so.
Although it is a closely divided
Senate. They did have to have him there. This is how the timing worked out in how the hearings, or how the confirmation votes progressed. They had to have him there for DeVos.
Yes.
So they couldn't confirm him before her.
Right. They needed to do that. And I imagine he will not vote on himself, although who knows anymore. But yeah, I mean, I think for Rule 19 purposes, probably a better premise would have been to say when you're being considered, the comments that you're making are comments about a secretary designee, not about a senator. Same person.
Right.
But
And also the fact that these were not Elizabeth Warren's words.
That too. Right. I didn't say it. I'm just saying somebody else did. I'll tell you what, as a compromise, Coretta Scott King can never speak in the Senate. How about that? I think she agreed.
Yeah, I don't think that would go over so well either.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, she can't speak. She's never going to anyway. Other people can speak for her, but still.
She might show up for a confirmation hearing someday.
Is she alive? I don't know if she is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought she had. I thought
think
she was not. I'm not positive that she is. I believe she's not, but we'll check before we commit to anything.
I think she was still with us.
All right. Well, then we'll have her on the show. But that wouldn't happen either, to be honest. I'll check it out as soon as.
Nope, wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was relatively recent, right?
Oh, ovarian cancer. I'd forgotten.
Okay. And it wasn't that long ago.
10 years.
Well, I guess to people like us, that's like practically yesterday.
Remember 2006?
Do I remember it? I do. I don't remember. Well, obviously, I didn't remember this particular incident all that well.
There was a lot going on that year, too.
Yes, that's true. Okay, so she's not going to. So there you go. So we'll just say, all right, you can't speak.
It's the King children that we've been seeing in the last decade.
Right. Now, if they want to speak, that's tougher. I think you're going to have to allow that.
Them live? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if they can get them to the Senate, and that wouldn't be a bad idea. I don't know if that's something they'd be willing to put up with, but you never know. But more likely testify.
It would be hard. One would be hard-pressed to go before this particular Senate.
Mm-hmm. I think so. Well, it's hard enough. She
was warned. She was given an explanation. Still, she persisted. Oh, Mitch McConnell. Oh, you are so going to rue the day you let that phrase leave your lips.
Well, I think so. That is rather amazing. The whole thing was dumb, and that just made it 100 times worse.
Apparently, Move On has already raised $215,000 for Elizabeth Warren's re-election campaign overnight.
Okay, I'll believe it.
Yep.
I think there's much more to be made, and in T-shirt sales and hats,
more than just for Elizabeth Warren. I suspect.
I would suspect so. Okay. Well, let's see. What other fun things might be happening?
Well, I'm going to have to take off in a little bit, but I want to make sure that you, along with Mitch McConnell, hear Paul Ryan's on Donald Trump.
Paul Ryan.
His attacks on judges.
Yeah.
He's respecting the process.
He is?
Yes.
Paul Ryan says Donald Trump is.
Yes.
Just to be clear.
He's attacking the judges,
yes.
but he's respecting the process. Yeah.
Yes, maybe. Haven't you ever heard of the adversarial system? He's an adversary of these judges.
And he's just frustrated with a ruling from a court.
I see. But what, I don't know. He's criticizing judges that haven't ruled.
Yeah.
But he's respecting the process.
You know, that's quibbling, Kagro.
I see. Oh. It's the sort of thing that people used to just cover up by saying, I can't comment on a pending case. That was understood to mean I criticize these judges, but I don't dare do it because they'll hold it against me when they write their opinion. And now they will. Because
it kind of brings us to Gorsuch, doesn't it? In my head, it does.
Okay.
I don't know. I jump around a lot, but
it's true. It does. This would be a good question for him in the hearing. Do you think doing something like this is respecting the process?
I think it would be a good question for Gorsuch. There are so many.
Yes.
Like, why aren't you withdrawing your nomination?
Well, yeah.
How, this is a golden ticket.
I guess so.
At age 49 being tapped for the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? But then imagine it's by Donald Trump.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Asterisk.
And you know your entire career on the court is going to be defined by a little asterisk.
Yeah, I guess.
Trump's nominee.
I'm sure I'm sure he'd be right if he assumed that it wasn't Donald Trump who, singled him out and selected him so much as he may have selected him at the end, coin toss, whatever.
Yeah.
But
no, it wasn't Donald Trump who did it. It was the far right.
Yeah. So I guess he could take something like that with him. And I guess he should be happy at this point. He's just happy that he didn't do, Bachelor style announcement like he was threatening to do.
Oh Lord.
Which I understand that they actually got the other judge who was still under consideration up to the end to actually
get in
participate
his car and start driving toward D.C.
Yes, that's right.
He stopped at a gas station and questioned by reporters about whether or not he was going to be nominated.
Just driving to Altoona for no reason, which we do here in Pittsburgh sometimes. But yeah, that's very interesting that he got the guy to participate in that. I can't imagine making that request or his saying, sure. Maybe that means he's a fun guy. I don't know. I hope we never find out.
Let us hope.
All right.
Let us hope.
Gorsuch, by the way, any word on when the hearings might begin for him? It usually will take a few weeks before that'll start. But are they rushing it?
I think Grassley said in a couple of weeks. I think as soon as they get the cabinet cleared.
Okay. Yeah, they do have some work to do there.
He's on the Hill. He's doing his meetings with the Senate, with the individual senators, I should say.
Right. Okay. So the process is moving forward. He's respecting that
yeah. Actually, so the process is moving forward, believe it or not.
Okay. So
it's not like Democrats really have the opportunity to completely blockade it. They're in the minority.
Yeah.
They could refuse to have meetings with him, but to what end?
Yeah, I don't think
it's more important that they have the meetings with him. They explore these things individually, and then they shape the questions that they're going to have in the hearings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as I'm sure that there are some people out there that say, why don't we boycott that? Why don't we refuse to participate in the process until they bring Merrick Garland back? And it's an option, but I think it doesn't really mesh very well with the way Democrats tend to work. They would prefer to be able to come to the press and say, I talked to the guy and I disagree with him strongly enough that I'm not going to vote for him.
Yeah.
As opposed to...
I think there's value in going through the process. I also, the end point is this guy's going to end up on the court however Mitch McConnell can make it happen.
Yeah. Probably
and I
true.
think that there's probably more value for it overall for Democrats to go through the process to be able to point up all of the problems with him. Mm-hmm. And to make the points that Republicans certainly wouldn't make about how does he feel about executive overreach? How would he be a stop on President Trump? Mm-hmm. I think those are important things that need to be talked about because the guy's going to end up on the court anyway. McConnell's going to make it happen however he has to make it happen.
Yes, in all likelihood. Although I will note one last thing was I noted last night Tim Murphy making the observation on the debates on the Senate floor and connecting that, I guess, with Gorsuch saying, gotta think tonight, that is the Elizabeth Warren fight, was a blow for the, let's hold off on a filibuster so McConnell doesn't get rid of it theory, if nothing else.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's that connection.
Yeah, I don't see anything at this point stopping McConnell from getting rid of the filibuster on the Supreme Court. Do you?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, Hatch has made noises about, no, we could never ever do that. I have too much respect for the institution, but that's Orrin Hatch.
Yeah, blue slips. Whatever. Respect for the institution. Sure you do. Yeah.
McCain has said he would never do it. Lindsey Graham has said he'd never do it. But you saw both of them voting for Rex Tillerson. So.
Yeah. So, anticipating that McConnell would probably do it eventually anyway, the idea of certainly, I'm very unhappy with the idea of preserving it by not using it. I understand the argument, and I do worry about, I worry only because it's Donald Trump, and you can't simply say, well, who could he get that's worse? Well, there's a million people he could get that are worse. And
yes, there are, and they would be probably, if you look at the makeup of the court, is going to be a liberal judge that gets replaced next.
Yes. And, he won't limit himself to federal judges or even state judges either. I mean, he may very well just simply say, I just want some lunatic. For all I know, Steve Bannon will put his own name in front of him in a little binder, and poof, I nominated Steve Bannon.
By then, Steve Bannon might not be
alive. He's not a good eater either.
Might not be so close to the president.
Yeah, that's hopefully the case. But
I don't think Mr. Trump is enjoying seeing President Bannon bandied about so freely.
No, he was even just perturbed by the Time magazine cover.
Yes.
Well, why didn't they
so
put
was
me
I.
in there again? Yes.
I'm glad that Time didn't do any retouching of that photograph, but in not doing so, it was really disturbing.
Yes. Well, he's not a healthy-looking guy. That's definitely true. All right. Well, we'll let you get to it, I guess. Believe it or not, you're up again.
I'm just trying to look at what else we've got lined up.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit out of North Carolina that Kerry's going to be writing on. A North Carolina court temporarily blocks law that limited the new governor's power, so that's good.
Ah, okay. I remember that one.
Chuck Cooper may be Trump's pick for Solicitor General. I do not know Chuck Cooper. Do you?
Chuck Cooper? No.
Never heard of him. So, if you want to find out more about him...
That sounds like a bad thing.
Watch the front page of Daily Kos.
Yeah. Solicitor General. Okay.
Kind of important.
Yeah.
Kinda.
Let's see. Let's see. There's a basketball player, Chuck Cooper. That's probably not him.
You never know.
Well, he died in 1984, so it's not him.
Well, then, okay.
Right. I mean, he was a basketball player.
Chuck Cooper All-Star? Oops.
Chuck, let's see. Chuck Cooper and Kirk. Is that the lawyer?
Conservative lawyer, nation's longtime friend of Trump's Attorney General nominee, Senator Jeff Sessions.
Well, what do you know? That is bizarre.
What do you know?
Well, okay, that'll make some sense. Obviously, the Attorney General will want his own person in there as Solicitor General. I mean, they'll want it. You don't usually just get it, but in this administration, you can. Huh.
A reliable movement conservative.
That's always Not
a surprise.
Oh, look at this. I'm looking in Wikipedia, so who knows whether that's really, true or not. But I'm just sort of scanning it. I just want to tell you that popping up in blue, meaning it's linked, is something, blah, 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 Iran-Contra. Uh-oh. What? Yeah, let's see. He was in the Office of Civil Rights at Justice Department in the 1980s. They're one of their best periods, of course. And at a lunch at the Old Ebbitt Grill with other administration officials, he saw documents showing the administration's role in the Iran-Contra affair of 1986. And I guess thought he might die with those secrets, but now he'll be Solicitor General instead. All right. Pretty wacky.
There we go.
Let's see. He clerked for Rehnquist. If that gives you some indication. Okay. Well, he wouldn't be out of place, perhaps, being among the former clerks of the Supreme Court as a Solicitor General. He knows how it operates. It's not that he's not nominating Matlock. That's the thing.
I don't know. Matlock might not be so bad.
Yeah, he does tend to wind things up inside an hour. That's good.
He does, and that's really very handy.
Especially at the court. That's all they give you.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, okay, so we'll be on the lookout for that. Anything else?
There we have what we know will happen so far.
Okay, and I understand Bernie Sanders.
Here's a new one.
Letter. Yes?
The DOD is trying to rent space in Trump Tower?
Yes, we did mention that one in the beginning of the show. Yeah, just like the Secret Service, they need to be near the president, and the president owns the whole building, and so guess what?
They have to pay rent to the president.
Right. They have to. I have to check in with Armando. Armando was saying that he thinks, he would argue that the Secret Service's occupancy there is unconstitutional. So I wanted to check in with him. Maybe he can tell us quickly what that's all about. I think it would be unconstitutional for him not to charge the DOD rent. That would be a Third Amendment violation. Finally, someone's going to violate the Third Amendment. I've been waiting 200 and something years for this. Probably the least litigated amendment we've got. There's a first for everything. First time
There's
for
a first for everything.
I tell you. Okay. Well, we'll be on the lookout for all these stories. I'm particularly interested about learning more about the Solicitor General than I could in a second of scanning Wikipedia.
Yes, and you'll be learning all of that from Carrie Eleved. So we've got you covered, Kagro. Everything that you need to, well, no, not everything. There's no possible way we can cover everything. No. But we'll get the highlights, definitely, on the front page of Daily Kos.
And then we'll watch Saturday Night Live and start it all over again next week.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Joan. I imagine there are now things to do. And
there are now
try
things
and wind
to do.
Things up here and hand it over to the after show for everything we didn't talk about so far.
All right.
Take care.
Talk to you next week.
Very good. Thanks for stopping by. All right, Joan McCarter, senior political writer, again, off to do all the senior political writing. Not all of it, of course. You hear that we're teasing a couple of other excellent stories. You'll want to keep your eye on the front page at the Daily Kos. Let's see. Here's a comment coming in through the Twitter lines. Justice Elliot Abrams knows how to run a secret government from the basement of the White House with the best of them. True, he's on his way back into the new Republican administration, allegedly, as well. This will be his third go-round. The last one wasn't too hot, and I had argued at the time that one, he should have been impeached from his office in the 80s for his role in Iran-Contra, and just to remind everybody that removal from office is not the end-all, be-all of the impeachment process, and yes, you can impeach any government official from almost anywhere, not just the president, but a reminder that punishment for impeachment also may, on the Congress's say-so, extend to barring that person from future federal government service, which would have saved us a lot of trouble in the George W. Bush administration on Elliot Abrams' second go-around, and would take him off the table for the third, unless, of course, President Trump said, "No, it doesn't. That's not in the Constitution. You're wrong. You people don't understand law." We'll see. Anyway, Armando, looks like we're probably going to run out of time in terms of your argument for why it would be I'd like to hear that, though. Maybe tomorrow you can think about bringing that one to us. Why it would be unconstitutional. He did say this in the background here, that rent Secret Service space in Trump Tower. I'm curious how we get to that. I mean, is it just emoluments-wise? Why them and not DOD? Does DOD, I mean, did you actually give any thought to the Third Amendment? It's very weird. Now, I understand, by the way, that this is actually not new in that, with the Secret Service in particular anyway. The Secret Service had to occupy some space on Vice President Biden's property in Delaware for when he was back there. They needed to have an office to carry out their mission there, and they did in fact pay rent to occupy that space. I guess what's new about it is I don't think we've ever had a president that owned a city high-rise and was, that was for rent, and that was was constructed for the sole purpose of charging people rent there and then having the government pay that directly to him. It's a very weird situation. That's new and unique, no doubt about that. Okay, well, it's time for us to wind things up here on the show and get ready to tell you what's coming up next on the after show, which we're not quite at the outro music, so that gives me a chance to then say, there we are. Justice, hit enter so that everything comes through. Here's all the information you need to know about what's coming up next, and we could probably get to some of that. Why don't we do that even before we roll our music so we can be sure we get through it all, because you'll need to know, because we left so many things out here. It's the Wednesday's Child is Full of Woe Wednesday episode, of course, coming up next. What they've got for you today: thousands of sportsmen, ranchers, outdoor business owners, and campers rallied last week in support of national parks and monuments, as you know, under considerable threat here in the Trump administration. Republicans responded by moving to restrict citizen input on public land use planning. How predictable is that? Republicans just moved to eliminate the only agency that protects elections from hacking, as though that were ever a concern. And Republican Alabama Governor Robert Bentley states, if the U.S. can put a man on the moon, Alabama should be able to build more mega prisons. That doesn't sound like a real problem for Alabama, but okay, that's the analogy you chose to use. Fantastic. They're doing great down there in Alabama. For the last half, a visit with Angela Marks, also known on Twitter as Angie in Washington State, for reports on legislative news and dispatches from the resistance. All of that, plus, of course, the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast Community Calendar, and more of the stories we ignore here on the Kagro and the More. That sort of works. On the after show with Wink and Justice coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. All right, we got to wrap it up and hand it over to them. There's plenty more where that came from. Of course, we'll fill out a full slate of shows tomorrow and Friday. We've even got some bizarre gun fail news to share with you, and yet more in the way of esoterica. Perhaps we'll set aside for a fun Friday show. We'll be back tomorrow with Greg. Talk to you then.
From Daily Coast Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
We thank you very much for listening in and remind you this is a good time to put this one in there. Remind you that you can help support our efforts and keep our show going over at our Patreon page, patreon.com/KagroX. Easy enough to find. Become a monthly supporter to keep us up and running so we can keep you sane.